Hello and welcome to Making Concessions. I'm Griffin Presno.
And I'm Cole Scott, and today we'll be talking about Perfect Blue.
Perfect Blue is a 1997 animated film directed by my all-time favorite director, Satoshi Kon. It is based off a novel, and he adapted the novel to a screenplay. Before we begin, we would like to issue a content warning, if you would like to.
In this movie, there is depiction of sexual assault, violence, gore, and nudity, and of course, a spoiler warning as we will be talking about it.
Yes, and there is also mentions of stalkers and
mental health.
Yeah, stalkers and a discussion of mental health. So first, we're going to give a little discussion about the plot. Perfect Blue is about a young lady named Mima. She's in her early 20s. She is a pop star, and at the beginning of the movie, she makes it official that she's going to give up being a pop star to pursue a career as an actress. And she takes on a career in a soap opera. And a lot of her fans are very angry about this. They feel like she has betrayed them. And especially one named Memonia, who is stalking her and is writing a blog called Mima's Room, which Mima gets to seeing and thinking that this is the ideal her and that she should live like this and not the way that she is living. And her mental health and her overall general sanity begin to sharply spiral as she begins to lose a grip on what is real life and what is the show she is filming and like what are her dreams. And first I would like for us to talk about the overall design and look and aesthetic of this film, as well as like directing and editing and all of that. I really love the look of this movie.
Yeah.
I think that one piece of like sort of meta commentary that this movie has is that a lot of anime at the time, it had a lot of the anime tropes of the very large eyes, very, very exaggerated body types. And the only characters who really have these types of looks to them are like celebrities. So like all of the pop stars, the actors, all the pop stars and actors, they all look like they are traditional anime characters, while all of the people who are not celebrities, who are just people, managers, photographers, stuff like that, they all look very somewhat realistic, somewhat uncanny valley. A lot of them have very small eyes, which is a little comical to me. A little bit funny looking. And a lot of the people who sexually manipulate and take advantage of Mima have very distorted faces. Like, will have very, it'll be like very vertical, like a lot of distance between eyes and the mouth and very spaced out eyes. Yeah, well, how did you feel about the aesthetic?
I really liked it. It felt very 90s. At the time, a lot of anime looked a lot the same because it was an aesthetic that was mostly kept because anime became very popular during the 90s, especially with Cowboy Bebop. And as I was watching it, I could tell the certain kind of styles reigned true between it.
Yeah, and it has that grainy look that lets you know that it was done through cell animation as opposed to being like digital, which I'm not one to say one is better or one is. They just have very different vibes, and I do like the vibe of cell animation.
One thing I really didn't appreciate was the character design, as you said.
Yeah.
The stalker, Memonia. Memonia, sorry.
You're good.
He has a very distorted face when you watch it. His eyes tend to go white and blank, and his mouth is really messed.
He's got like very, very displaced teeth.
Yeah, and it's obvious for a choice that they made the villains look like this so you could tell they are villains, but it's a stalker. And I thought the movie would have been a little bit scarier if the stalker had looked like everyone else, because in modern day and in real life, stalkers like Ted Bundy look just like people that we see every day, and they aren't so obvious.
Yeah, and while we're talking about the look of Memonia, I've always found that he looks very much like Michael Myers, sort of. And it doesn't help that he's always wearing like a blue jumpsuit.
Yeah.
And I do like that he looks like a horror movie villain, but I would also really like if he did look like realistic, like just a normal guy. But my favorite shot in this movie, and probably of any movie, is at the start when Mima and her pop group Cham are performing, and they're doing their routine, it cuts to the front of the audience, and it shows Memonia like on his knees. He's kind of going like this with his hand and like closing his eyes, and you don't really know what he's doing until like the camera cuts to show his point of view. And the reason he's going like this is that it looks like he's literally holding Mima in his hands. And I think that's a really great way to establish who this character is in a very nonverbal way.
I agree. I think also in that shot, it was really interesting that all of the pop stars had the exact same sprite. They looked exactly the same, and I think that says something a lot about the theme of the movie.
Yeah, and I think it's like they had a few varieties. Like one might be a little shorter, one might have like a beauty mark, but yeah, they all looked very similar. And that can also just be that it's a commentary on the industry, on like the pop industry. Next, we're going to go into a brief commercial break, and when we get back, we are going to be discussing the characters.
Opportunities. They're found here, and here, and here. They inspire her, motivate him, prepare them. And when those opportunities start here, they can take you anywhere. Wayne State College, where opportunities today prepare you to lead tomorrow. Get started today at explorewaynestatecollege.com.
Welcome back.
Welcome back to Making Concessions. Yes, we're still discussing Perfect Blue. We're going to begin our discussion on the characters. There's really only 3 different characters that I would like to discuss. The first one being Mima, who's the protagonist. I think Mima is a very relatable character. She's very clearly youthful at the start of the movie. When they show her like 1-bedroom apartment, she's got a bunch of like toys, plushies, video games, all that. She doesn't really know how to work a computer. She has to learn how to do that. And as she continues to go throughout the movie, she's realizing that, she has to grow up. She can't keep being exploited and manipulated, and she has to live for herself, or else it's going to damage her. How do you feel about Mima?
I think Mima is a very good representation of how media and fame can change someone. In the beginning of the movie, like you said, she's very youthful and hopeful and almost childish. It's very clearly established that she is young. And as she gets older and gets more into the film instead of her pop star career, she becomes more sexualized, and because of this, she becomes more and more depressed. Where at the beginning of the movie, she was hopeful and happy, and she had this sort of brightness in her voice, but towards the end of the movie, she just seemed so down, and she couldn't even find a reason to get out of bed most days.
Yeah, and I always find that an aspect of Mima that is talked about is the imaginary Mima that she sees. This imaginary Mima is how Mima projects herself, like how she thinks she projects herself as like a pop star, how she thinks she would be feeling and living if she had never given up that career in music. And it's all the pop star version of Mima is always there, telling Mima like that she's a failure, that she should have never changed careers, and that she should be regretting her life choices. And it feels a lot like that imaginary Mima is a lot of her depression, a lot of her mental health becoming personified. And with the harming from her stalker and the use of the blog Mima's Room, it is giving it much more of a clear voice and much more of a clear person. And I really like imaginary Mima, not like I enjoy them, but I really like this personification of someone losing grip with like reality and with self-identity. And those are both just such strong themes in this movie. The last character I'd like to discuss is Memonia, the stalker. Now, you've already said you have an issue with his design, and I would agree with you that a change in design would be nice. But I really love the way his character is portrayed. He really feels, you really understand his mentality. He feels like he has to protect the quote-unquote real Mima, this unknown third party who is sending him emails saying that they're Mima, and that the Mima on TV is a fake. and that he has to do something about it. It's very scary in a way that's like, we've seen incidents like this happen in the real world. We have with this celebrity worship syndrome, like with the incident with Bjork back in the 80s. She had she had this horrible stalker who was constantly stalking her, following her around, and the whole thing ended with him trying to kill her by trying to mail her a bomb, which thank goodness it got caught in the post. It got caught, but you see, like, while Memonia doesn't look like a real stalker, he acts a lot like how some of them can be, how the most extreme cases can be, especially towards celebrities at this time.
I think it's pretty interesting that Memonia's character is pretty ahead of his time, honestly, especially with parasocial relationships, especially in modern day. As the internet gets bigger and we feel closer to celebrities, people tend to feel like they have an actual relationship with these people, where it becomes unhealthy. And I think that the characterization of Memonia is something that was portrayed before this became an actual like larger issue, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and speaking of this film, kind of, being really ahead of its time, let's move in to discuss themes. I think a very strong theme in this is projection, and you said it was very ahead of its time with its theming on parasocial relationships, and I also think it was very ahead of its time on projection, because this movie came out in the 90s. And back when it came out, it was really like celebrities could kind of relate to this.
Yeah.
But like nowadays, it's like Andy Warhol said, everyone gets their 15 minutes of fame in the future. We all have these social media accounts where everyone is following us, and we want to portray ourselves in a certain way, as cool, as funny, as beautiful, as all of these things. And I think this movie really came before all of that started to take head. And it really was able to speak about that before it was even an issue, which I found it to be rather genius. And I think Satoshi Kon, he really loves dealing in dualities. In his last film, Paprika, it was about the real world and the dream world. In this one, it is reality and the sort of metaverse where we project ourselves and our personas. And then finally, I'd like to discuss the theme of forced maturity. Before I wanted to talk about over-sexualization, but you made some really great points about how it might not be that it's more over-sexualization, but that it's more forced maturity. Would you like to talk about that?
I think that the character, like I said, she is fairly young, and she's portrayed very young. She was never overly sexualized, but it's portrayed as that, but she's always been sexualized. And you could tell that in the first shot, in the first scene, she is a pop star and she is performing, but if you look in the crowd, there's only men. There is not a singular woman in the crowd, which I think was the over-sexualization of her. She wore skimpy outfits, all of these men drooled over her. There was a fight because of these girls. And I think that it's kind of wrong to assume that it's just sexualization. She was always put in this high pedestal. And I think that as she began the film career, she was forced to be more mature, and she was put into more mature roles in a more mature time of her life. And it was so quickly that it very much detrimented her mental health.
Yeah, so like there is one of them is that she is asked if she would be comfortable filming a rape scene. And she's very clearly not comfortable with it, but she says that she'll do it anyway because she doesn't want to let down the people who have gotten her in this position. And since she is clearly so young, so I don't want to say naive, but like she's so new to this environment, she doesn't really realize that she just sometimes needs to say that there are things she's not comfortable with. And I think by the end of the movie, she really starts to identify that and start to realize that she needs to live for herself and not for the way that others want her to be.
I completely agree.
Yeah. So to end this, let's give our overall thoughts on the movies. Would you like to go first?
Overall, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the aesthetic and the way it was done. One of my biggest issues was it was trying to force itself to be like a feminized movie, where it was this girl who was over-sexualized and she was stalked, and it was a lot of these bad things happening to her because she was female and she didn't have much power. However, I don't feel like it did that. As I've pointed out, the movie was written by a man, and the book was also written by a man. And I felt like it was kind of unfair to call it a feminization movie when there was very little aspect of female empowerment.
Yeah, and there's very little female input.
Yeah.
And I would have to agree with you on that. Now, with Satoshi Kon, I just kind of have this. He just kind of has this bubble where I'm just like, all of his movies are perfect, and it's like even if there's something wrong with it, I'm like, it's still a perfect movie.
Yeah.
It's like it's a perfect movie. There's a lot wrong with it, but it's a perfect movie.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I think everyone kind of has that kind of movie maker.
Yeah.
And that's Satoshi Kon for me. So if I had to give this a rating, I would obviously give it a 5 out of 5. I do want to rewatch it with a lot of the stuff you've put forward. I'd really like to see how a lot of those lenses sort of portray the film in that way. What would you give it?
I think I'd give it a 3 out of 5. At first, I really didn't enjoy it because of certain aspects of it, but as I think about it more, and I've rewatched it since the last time, I've really come to terms with some of the themes in it, and I've really enjoyed the kind of aesthetic that it's given, especially with the art style. I've really loved the art style.
Yeah, I really love the art style too. I call this one of those like T-shirt animes. Where
Yeah.
you can wear a T-shirt of this anime, and it's just kind of like it's not really something that's kind of nerdy. It's like this, Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah.
And a few other the 90s ones. But so that was our discussion on Perfect Blue. We're going to take a brief commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about a few of the upcoming films.
Opportunities. They're found here and here and here. And when those opportunities start here, they can take you anywhere. Get started today at explorewaynesstatecollege.com.
Welcome back to Making Concessions. We're now going to be discussing the upcoming films of 2021 and 2022. First one we're going to want to talk about is Dune. Now, I am very excited for Dune.
I am too.
Directed by Denis Villeneuve. I believe it was adapted for a screenplay by him as well, based on the book, the sci-fi epic Dune by Frank Herbert. I'm very, very excited for this movie.
Some A-list actors in
Yes.
it too.
You've got Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya as the main characters, who they're both. It's kind of just it's got both the teenage heartthrobs, so you already know it's going to do at least well in that aspect.
It's a big week for Timothée Chalamet.
It's been a big few years for him.
Yeah.
So you got Timothée Chalamet, you have Zendaya, Oscar Isaac, Jason Momoa playing Duncan, Idaho. Great name. I love that name. And this film is about Paul Atreides, played by Timothée Chalamet. I think it's Atreides. Sorry to all the Dune fans. I've only somewhat read the book. They don't have the pronunciations right next to the names. They should. It's a sci-fi book, but it's about the Atreides family taking over this planet Arrakis to mine the planet Arrakis, for it has a very valuable mineral called the spice melange. And Zendaya is from a tribe of Mentats who are being driven out of their homeland on Arrakis. Arrakis is also they call it the Dune planet because it is just a desolate sand wasteland. And there's a lot of like political intrigue going on with Paul's father and with Paul turning out to be this chosen one, the Kwisatz Haderach. I know I said that one right, Dune fans. Don't try and get that one in the comments. I know I say Kwisatz Haderach right. I can even spell it. I'm very excited for this movie. It looks beautiful.
It really does.
Oh, yes. It's got something that can be compared to, as in the 70s, they tried making a Dune film directed by David Lynch. Now, trying to get David Lynch to make a big-budget Hollywood movie is not a good idea.
No.
He does what he wants. But having Denis Villeneuve, who has a track record, he's made Blade Runner 2049, which, if this movie even looks a fraction like the desert scenes in that movie, oh boy. Very excited for this one.
I am as well. We'll also be talking about Ghostbusters Afterlife, which is a sequel to the 2 other Ghostbuster movies were made.
Yes, the first 2.
The first 2.
There was another one,
There-
but yeah.
This movie was directed by Jason Reitman and stars some teenage, also heartthrob actors.
kind of.
Finn Wolfhard, who has become really big in the last couple of years.
Oh yeah. Well, since this movie has just been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, he's very clearly grown up.
Yeah.
As this, by the time this movie comes out, he's much older. It also stars Paul Rudd. Very cool.
Amazing actor. And then McKenna Grace, who is just, she's great.
Love me some
Amazing
Paul Rudd.
actress.
I love Jason Reitman. Director. He directed Juno.
Yeah.
Which I love Juno.
One of my
Juno.
favorites.
Yeah, very much. And the reason I'm cautiously optimistic about this one is that Jason Reitman is, of course, the son of Ivan Reitman, who wrote and directed the first Ghostbusters. Now that being said, I've never really found the idea of a Ghostbusters sequel to be a very good idea. I think the first Ghostbusters movie is just such a lightning in a bottle concept, where it was just the right people at the right time in the right place. That I think it was just such a product of its time. But this one is really looking like it could do a lot.
I'm really excited to expose Ghostbusters to a new generation, because I brought it up once to my little 12-year-old cousin, and she did not know what Ghostbusters was. So I'm really excited for her to be able to go to a movie of Ghostbusters that I loved as a child, and for her to see what I got to see.
Yes, and we've kind of had it teased in trailers that we might be seeing the original Ghostbusters.
At least one of them.
Yeah,
Bill
Dan
Murray.
Aykroyd.
Bill Murray is also in it.
Is he in it?
Yep.
Okay, because I've seen that. Because there was one trailer in which they showed Dan Aykroyd for a second, and Bill Murray is apparently on to come back as Peter Venkman, which is very great.
Really excited.
Yeah.
But basically the plot is these 2 kids who are the grandkids of one of the Ghostbusters.
Egon Spengler, yes.
They come into an inheritance of his stuff, and it's them doing Ghostbuster things.
Yes, and there are some strange happenings in their little small town.
Ooh.
They're very much grabbing the Stranger Things
Yeah.
aesthetic by the horns. They've got the creepy small town, the mysterious goings-ons, the supernatural aesthetic. They've got the Finn Wolfhard. And I'm really liking what they've done to advance the aesthetic of Ghostbusters, such as giving the Ecto-1 a gunner seat. I thought that was very cute. It felt like something that would have been on a Ghostbusters toy back in the day. So I'm cautiously optimistic. While this isn't like a movie I am ready for, like Dune, I'm kind of excited. Trying to keep my expectations in check.
I'm more excited for it to laugh at it.
Yeah, I'd hope so.
I feel like it's going to be a comedy.
Yeah.
It's going to have a lot of jokes in it, as a lot of modern aged movies do, especially science fiction.
Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Making Concessions. I've been Griffin.
And I'm Cole.
Be sure to stick around for much more to come.